Welcome back to Psychology with Dipali, the best destination for great content in psychology.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today the topic which we will be learning is why does intelligence vary among individuals, and the topics which we will be covering today are the individual differences in intelligence, studies on the impact of heredity and environment on intelligence, the assessment of intelligence and the concept of intelligence quotient, and the normal probability curve along with the classification of IQ. So let's start with the interesting question of the day. This person was a pioneer in the field of forensic psychology. He studied child development by observing his own children. However, we know him today primarily because of the concept he proposed, which changed the field of assessment of intelligence. So, do you know who this person was? We shall know as we go along. So, to start with, let us talk about individual differences in intelligence and how does it come about. Basically, there is an interplay or there is an interaction between nature and nurture. Nature refers to heredity, that is whatever we have inherited from our parents, and nurture refers to the environment. So therefore, there is a lot of evidence in terms of studies done which tell us about the hereditary factors which influence the intelligence that a person has. And these studies are mainly done from twins as well as adopted children. Now, these studies are done on two types of twins, identical twins and fraternal twins. Now, what are identical twins? Identical twins are twins who are called monozygotic twins. When the zygote is in the womb of the mother, instead of developing as one single child, the zygote splits and it develops into two different children. Therefore, these children who are identical twins are called monozygotic twins and they have 100% genetic similarity. Their genetic structure is exactly the same as they both come from the same zygote. Compared to that, you have fraternal twins who are non-identical because there are two zygotes formed in the mother's womb and they grow as two different individuals from these two zygotes. So they don't share 100% genetic similarity. They are having around 50% similarity as comparable to what we would share with our siblings. So when studies have been done where they compare the intelligence of identical twins who have been reared together means since birth they have been staying in the same family and have grown up together. When their intelligence is compared, it is found that the correlation or the relationship between the two sets of twins is almost 0.90, which is a very high correlation. So that tells us that there is a very high possibility that the intelligence that they are exhibiting is due to whatever they have inherited from their parents. Now, twins who have been separated early on in childhood, they also show a remarkable kind of similarity in their intellectual potential. So you will find not only in the intellectual potential but even in their behavior as well as personality, you will find some similarities. Now they have been separated at birth, so they are growing up in two different kinds of environments and two different kinds of families. So nurture is different. But what they only share is their 100% genetic similarity. So the intelligence of identical twins who have been reared in different environments correlates to 0.72, which again is a fairly high correlation, which shows that in spite of growing up in two different kinds of environments, their intelligence is very highly similar to each other. So the credit to that obviously goes to their genetic potential. Now, if you look at the correlation patterns of fraternal twins, studies show that the correlation is almost 0.60, which means again, since they are having only 50% similarity of genetic potential and yet they are also staying in the same family and growing up together, they have around 0.60% of correlation. Then you have brothers and sisters who are or siblings who are reared together. Their similarity in intelligence is around 0.50, and if you have any siblings who have been separated at birth and they are now reared in different families, their correlation of intelligence is around 0.25, and therefore this shows that there is a strong factor of heredity or our genetics which does have a role to play in the kind of intellectual potential that we have. Now they have also done studies of adopted children. That is, children who have been adopted by certain families, and when they have compared their intelligence to their biological parents as well as to their adoptive parents, they have found that their intelligence is more similar to their biological parents rather than their adoptive parents initially, which means when a child is now living in another family, even then initially his or her intelligence is not similar to the family in which he is now growing up, his adoptive family. It is more similar to the family to which he biologically belongs, that is his parents. Now, later on, they have done other studies where they have found that children who come from disadvantaged backgrounds and then they were adopted into families who belong to a higher socioeconomic status. So now the initial environment in which they were being brought up is possibly not as nutritionally as well as psychologically rich as compared to the families in which they are now adopted into. Now they find that there is a large jump or increase in their intelligence scores after they have been adopted into a family which belongs to a higher socio-economic status. So therefore, environmental deprivation, where there are certain needs which are not being met, definitely has a lowering impact on intelligence. It lowers the intelligence scores, while a rich nutritional background or a good family background where there is some kind of quality schooling, there is a good interaction level between the parents and the children, definitely gives a boost to the child and therefore increases their intelligence. Now, there is therefore a consensus amongst most psychologists that intelligence is a product or a combination of a complex interaction between nature and nurture, heredity and environment. Now, heredity can be viewed as something that just sets a range. That means it sets a limit within which an individual's development can actually shape up and develop, and the support and opportunities that is provided to that child from the environment is going to decide to what extent will this potential that he or she has inherited is actually going to be expressed. So in assessment of intelligence, the initial people who were working in this field of assessment of intelligence were Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon, who made the first successful attempt to formally measure intelligence in 1905. They also devised many scales or tests for measurement of intelligence, and in 1908 they revised their scale and they introduced a concept of mental age. Now, mental age is a measure of a person's intellectual development which is relative to the people of his or her age group. So, if a child is 8-year-old and his intellectual abilities as assessed by this particular test is also similar to that of other 8-year-olds, then he would be having a mental age of 8. So a mental age of 5, for example, would mean that a child's performance on an intelligence test equals the average performance level of a group of 5-year-olds. And therefore, this kind of comparison between the mental age and the chronological age, that is the actual biological age of a person, was done by using these kinds of intelligence tests. And a bright child's mental age was expected to be more than his or her chronological age. For a dull child who is not very intellectually proficient, the mental age would be somewhat lower or below the chronological age. And Binet and Simon use the term retardation, which of course we don't use nowadays. We use the term intellectual disability, but in those years it was used, and they defined retardation as being 2 mental ages below the chronological age, which means if a child is 10 years old and his mental age is 8, so chronological age is 10 but his mental age is 8, he is actually 2 mental ages below his chronological age, and therefore by virtue of definition by this particular test standards, he would be classified as belonging to the retarded or intellectually disabled category of intelligence. So the answer to the question of the day is William Stern. Now, who was he? he and his wife Clara, they greatly influenced the area of child development. So his initial work was in the area of child development, where he used his own three children, Hild, Gunther and Eva, as subjects. And he and his wife started observing and journaling their children's behavior right from the day they were born, and each of them were followed and their activities and behavior was noted down in the journal till they became the ages of 12, 10 and 7 respectively. So this was the initial data which they used to then give various theories of child development. He was also a pioneer in the field of forensic psychology as we know of it today, and he explored the psychology of eyewitness testimony. He felt that memory is fallible. That means memory is not perfect. When we say that we remember something, it is possible that what we are remembering is not exactly what has happened in a particular situation. And therefore, if a person is giving witness in the court and is providing his or her testimony which might put somebody behind the bars for a crime which this person says was definitely committed, then there is a possibility that intentionally or unintentionally the memory which he has of that event may not be totally correct. So he was one of the first individuals who started researching on this particular topic. Of course, today we have a lot of research on this which does show that eyewitness testimony is not 100% foolproof. And therefore, the findings that he gave at that point of time had the potential to improve the entire criminal justice system in terms of how eyewitness testimony was used and the value which eyewitness testimony was given to. And he basically illustrated the practical applications of psychological research. And he was actually far ahead of his times, because he noted that if in a courtroom there is a child who is providing an eyewitness testimony or is possibly telling something in court, is offering his viewpoint, then he wanted certain psychological intervention should to be present in the courtroom, so that the child would not feel anything which would emotionally hamper his growth. So therefore, a consultation of a professional psychologist was something he advocated even in those years, and therefore he was a visionary as far as research into these kind of issues related to memory, eyewitness testimony and child development was concerned. But what he was best known for was the concept of intelligence quotient. He, in 1912, devised the concept of intelligence quotient, where he is talking about the mental age which is divided by the chronological age of a person and then multiplied by 100 to get a value. The value which we get in this particular kind of process is called the intelligence quotient. So he was the first person to devise this, and we primarily know him for this. But he had a rich background of experience as well as research which made him stand out amongst other researchers at his point of time. So if we have a person who has a mental age which is equal to his or her chronological age, the IQ would be 100. If the mental age is more than the chronological age, IQ would be above 100. And if the mental age is less than the chronological age, it would be below 100. So let us say, for example, there is a 10-year-old child with a mental age of 12. So this child would have an IQ of 120, because 12 divided by 10 into 100 would give you 120 as the IQ. The same child with a mental age of 7 would have an IQ of 70. Why? Because 7 divided by 10 into 100 would give you the value of 70. So the average IQ in the population is around 100 irrespective of age. Now, how do we assess intelligence? IQ scores are distributed in a population in such a way that most of the people, if they are given an intelligence test, they will score in such a way that they will score in the middle range of the distribution of the entire set of scores. And only a few people will have very extreme scores. So the frequency distribution, or the way we see the distribution of IQ scores in the population, is called the normal probability curve, which is a bell-shaped curve. And this type of distribution basically is symmetrical, which means there is a central value which is the mean, and around the central value on both the sides the curve is symmetrical. So this is the normal probability curve. So if you can see here, there the mean or the center line is giving a value of 100. So this is an example of the IQ scores of a distribution of the Wechsler intelligence score, which is a scale to measure intelligence. Now if you see, there is a green band in the center. So the center is the mean value of 100, and for every increase to the right or to the left, there is an increase in 15 IQ points. So let us say if 100 is the average, 115 would be above average, 130 would be superior, 145 would be very superior, and so on. Similarly, if we look at the left, it would be 15 IQ points less than 100 would be an IQ of 85, which is below average. 15 IQ points less than that would be 70, which is the borderline of intellectual disability, and below that would be an IQ of 55, and below that again there will be very few individuals. So most of the individuals, if you see, would be somewhere between 15 IQ points plus or minus from the mean value. So between 85 to 115 IQ range, you will find most of the population, say around 68% of the population, will score within 15 IQ points above or below 100, because 100 is the average of the population as far as intelligence is concerned. And if you take two other points, that is within 30 points, that is plus 30 or minus 30, there you will get around 95% of the population. So between 30 points above 100 and 30 points below 100, you can say almost the entire population is covered. Most of the people therefore lie in this range, and very few people will lie in the range above that or below that. So if you see, the mean IQ score in a population, as I told you, is 100, which is the average, and people with IQ scores in the range of 90 to 110, they have normal intelligence. Those with IQ below 70 are suspected to have intellectual disability, and people with IQ above 30 are considered to have exceptional talents. You will find that below that, you will find very few people who would be coming into the category of extremely deficient in intelligence or extremely high in intelligence. So you have categories of average, high average, superior, very superior on the upper side, and on the lower side you have average, below average, then you have borderline, and then you have intellectual deficiency, which again has 4 categories of mild, moderate, severe, and profound. So the normal probability curve that we just saw has tails, that is the two ends of the normal probability curve. They are told to be asymptotic. Asymptotic means they never meet the horizon, that is the x-axis, which is the symptote. So they never touch the x-axis, which indicates that a variable can take on any value, which is even theoretically possible, may not be practically possible. So even if it is a 0.0001% chance of a score falling beyond the level that we are expected to see, the probability theoretically is there, but the probability is very less. So therefore the tails of the curve never touch the x-axis, because we assume that there is scope for some extreme scores to lie somewhere at the extremes of the normal probability curve. This normal probability curve, as I told you, is also called the bell curve or the bell-shaped curve, because it looks like a bell, and it is also called the Gaussian distribution. Why? Because it is named after the German mathematician Carl Gauss, who first described this normal probability curve. Now coming back to the IQ classification, so we talked about it based on the normal probability curve. So if you see in the center, you have average IQ, which is coming in the range of 90 to 109 IQ points, and 50% of the population will be belonging to this category of having average or normal IQ. And if you see below it, you have below average or low average, which has an IQ score range of 80 to 89, and around 16.1% of the population will fall in this category. Below that, you have the IQ categories of 70 to 79, which comes in borderline. Borderline means it is the borderline between intellectual disability and below average. And there are around 6.7% of the individuals only who belong to this category. And below this, that is 69 and below, which is 70 and below that, is an extremely low IQ, or what we call intellectual disability. This represents only 2.2% of the population. Similarly, we have similar values on the other end, which is 110 to 119. This category of IQ is representing the high average or above average IQ scores, where you have 16.1% of the population belonging to this category. Above that, you have 120 to 129 IQ category, which is the superior IQ category. Again, we have 6.7% of the population belonging to this category. And above that, that is 130 and above, you have very superior IQ, which again 2.2% of the population only belong to this. So if you see at both the extreme ends, the percentage of people falling in those categories is the same. In 130 and above, which is very superior, the extreme at the higher end, you have 2.2% of the population. Again, in the intellectual disability category, which is again at the very low end, you also have 2.2% of the population. So at both the extremes as well as in the mid ranges, you have exactly this similar type of people, or similar type of percentage of people who are coming in that category. And using this particular kind of classification, we are able to categorize people as belonging to different kind of IQ categories, and that helps us in basically knowing more about them. So what is the use of having intelligence tests? Basically, it tells us how to identify people who are at the extremes of intellectual functioning. As I already told you, only around 2% of the population would be in the extreme, higher extreme or the lower extreme. So either they would be intellectually disabled in the lower extreme, or intellectually gifted in the higher extreme. And these two groups basically are very different from the normal population. Those who are in the intellectual disability category are very different from normal IQ category individuals. Similarly, those who are extremely high IQ individuals, very superior category, they are also very different from average IQ individuals. So an intelligence test basically helps us to identify individuals belonging to extreme categories, so that we can know about it and therefore identify which kind of learning strategies can be used to teach them, so that they are better able to use their abilities. So a summary of what we learned today is individual differences in intelligence, studies on the impact of heredity and environment on intelligence, the assessment of intelligence and the concept of intelligence quotient, and the normal probability curve, and the classification of IQ. So thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments about the topics in psychology which you would like to learn from me next, and I will try my best to create a video for that. So do comment, like and subscribe to my channel Psychology with Dipali, and also follow me on Instagram. That's all from me for now.